Welcome to Life Rebounding. As we continue to reflect on Margaret Self's comment from her book Inner Compass, how I am, however broken, is a place of grace, I want to reflect on the phrase today, how I am, however broken, is at times faltering, but not a failure. And let me base that on Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, where Paul writes, I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who has loved me and given himself for me. What Paul is saying is that there's a change that's happening in his life, has happened, and continues to happen in terms of the transformation of his life by way of his relationship with Christ. Where I was growing up, when you met somebody in the street, the typical greeting was, how's she going, buddy? Here in Canada, typically even in North America, people would greet each other by saying, how are you doing? A friend of mine named Paul has been involved in Bible translation in Taiwan for pretty much his whole ministry. And he's been working in particular on a translation of the Bible into Hakka for the mountain people of Taiwan. And early on in the translation work, I asked him how people would greet each other there, and his response was, well, people here always ask, have you eaten yet? Well, whatever the greeting is that you use where you live, let me ask you this question today, not just as a greeting, but as a real question of the heart. How are you? How are things going in your world? That's the real question. If you were to do an inventory today of your emotions, how would you describe them? Are you sitting in a place of health? Are you sitting in a place where you have fairly high EQ, that's emotional quotient, understanding who you are and how you respond? As you think about your feelings, as you think about your emotions, do an inventory. Sit down and ask yourself, what are the emotions that you're feeling? Especially if you're not in a very good place, ask yourself what you're feeling and why. Here's the reason why I asked that question. I recognize that we falter at times. I certainly do. I struggle at times with my own sense of self and struggle with my own emotions. That's kind of a fact of life for an awful lot of us. But here's what I'm trying to get at. There are some questions that I try and ask of myself, and you might be able to ask of yourself, just to try and explore what your level of health is. So here's some of the questions I ask. What's my self-talk like? Now, let me put it to you this way. If you call yourself names that you'd react pretty aggressively towards if you heard somebody using those names towards somebody else, you probably have a question that you need to answer about your own self-talk. If the first thing that comes out of your mouth about yourself is not a good name, then pause. What's your self-talk like? Another question might be, how are your relationships? Are they growing? Are they healthy? Are they in a place where things are good? Are there things that you can do to improve them, to grow them? Another question might be, how are you using your gifts and your talents? God's given every one of us gifts and talents that we can use for His glory, for the blessing and encouragement of others. So how are you using your gifts? Do you know what they are? If you don't know what they are, what are you doing to learn about what they are so that you can begin to use them? God has a wonderful way of matching our passions and our personality with our gifts. And so if we're only functioning out of personality and not using the gifts that He's given us, then we miss a part of the blessing that He has for us. Another question is, how are you living out the values? There's a commercial on TV right now by Canadian Tire, a department store here, and they make the comment about our values are more important now than ever. Well, they're referring to the COVID crisis, but the question that always irritates me when I hear that commercial is, why are our values more important now than they ever were before? Surely our values, how we live and how we live them out, has been important all along. So how are your values being lived out? How's your relationship to God? Is it growing? Are you doing something that can help you grow in your relationship with Him? I find that I need to spend some time in the scripture every day. I need to spend some time in prayer. It just helps clarify my own brain to keep some of the mud out. Not to mention that it's good for my relationship with him to be in contact. Like any relationship, you need that contact to constantly to stay in tune with each other. And so those are questions just simply to ask, to do a bit of an inventory. And here's the reality. We may falter, we may fail, but that's not the last chapter of our lives. We may falter, but never let us hear ourselves refer to ourselves as failures. We just have faltered. We have had a failure, but we're not failures. And that's certainly not the way God sees us. God sees us as people who are moving towards victory in our lives. And there's the opportunity for rebound. If you have stumbled, if you've fallen, if you've faltered, today's an opportunity for a rebound, and I invite you to take that opportunity for rebound, and step up with it. There's a big difference between failing and being a failure. And we need to shift the focus sometimes from the names we call ourselves to the name that God has for us as one of his children. And just as a sort of a cure for that today, let me invite you to do something that I've often done with my youngest son when he was coming home from school. I'd ask him to find 3 things he could be thankful for. So today, see if you can find 3 things to be thankful for. Do it again tomorrow. Do it the rest of the week. And you might begin a habit of shifting focus. Well, may the Lord be with you today, and may you be drawn into a deeper love for him as you take your next step in faith with him.